Hello, how are we?
I'm good. I'm still sort of processing what's happened this week. It's been a big moment, but yeah, very, very good.
Well, let's explain what has happened this week.
Yeah.
So there was a big news story this week that the Sphere, which was going to be a rather large, rather unsightly building, had a planning application in Stratford, and it was going to be possibly a music culture venue. That's now not going to go ahead. And can you talk me through why it isn't?
Yeah, so it's just on the process side of it, the Mayor of London has rejected it, and that's a normal part of the process that's referred to him for major applications like this. But the reasons are primarily because although it's a concert venue, one of the major aspects of this is that it's a orb covered in LED screens, advertising screens primarily. And there's one already built in Las Vegas. People might have seen it at the F1, I think, earlier this weekend or over the weekend.
Those crazy, it had a sort of emoji with eyes that was following, driving around.
Yeah, so they're very clever using it for opportunities like that. But the reason why they want it is for advertising. The Sphere would have actually been visible from Stratford Station, like from the platforms. So just an incredible number of people to get adverts in front of. And it's fairly obvious, but Stratford isn't Las Vegas, right? Where the Sphere was due to be put was in between two major housing developments, very, very close to them, that would have led to blackout blinds in those developments. So you can understand why they're opposed to it. And it's also a big light pollution problem. There's a biodiversity problem, and that's why the Environment Committee recommended that Sadiq Khan reject it. So that was led by Green Party Assembly member Zach Polanski at the time, and he said, when this comes to you, Sadiq, you should reject it, and he's listened, which is great because the Sphere is so egregious that until now, every single representative of the area at every single level, so that's the MPs, the Assembly members, the councillors, and the Mayor of Newham, we were all opposed to it, and that's different political parties as well. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't happen without really strong feeling among the community.
Who wanted it to be built?
Well, a small number of people who live in the area who, on the face of it, think it's cool. Mostly people who, don't live anywhere near the Sphere, sort of see it on social media and think, oh, that looks cool, but doesn't really think too much about the actual impacts on the community. And it's not just the light pollution. There's concerns about Stratford Station. So Stratford Station is already a station that's at capacity. Anyone who's been there through rush hour knows that it feels quite dangerous at times. I've been on the platforms and genuinely worried about being pushed onto the tracks. And you've already got the O2 at North Greenwich on the Jubilee line. So there was a real concern about how you were going to get people in and out of the area. And it turns out that they were largely planning to just take over Westfield, Stratford International car parks. I think there's actually a really crazy statistic. So for a stadium of 20,000 people, do you know how many cycle hangars they were planning? Cycle parking spots? Less than 100.
Okay.
But over 20,000 people.
Do a lot of people cycle to concerts?
Well, I think more people should, but I think that is just quite an egregiously low number, and I believe is actually against a London plan. And people talk about all the time about, politicians shouldn't be making decisions. We should have a rules-based system where the rules are really, really clear. If you pass the rules, you think you get to build the thing. Well, this didn't pass the rules. This wasn't an intervention by the Mayor. This was a recommendation by civil servants saying that this doesn't meet the London plan. And that's what we've been saying all along. But the unelected members on the planning committee overruled the councillors and sent it on to the Mayor. And actually, as councillors, when we're involved in planning, we get quite a lot of warnings about, if you make the wrong decision, this could be appealed and it could cost the council a lot of money. In this case, it's the unelected people that have spent untold amounts of public money trying to push this through when it was on the face of it against planning rules.
Talk me through a couple of them. So it's ability to have the facilities that it would need to serve it. So you've got a problem with the station, you've got a problem with the cycle provisions.
Yeah.
What else is it? Car parking?
So, I mean, the disabled car parking is another point. They didn't have a feasible plan, in my view, for disabled blue badge parking.
Right.
At some point, they were talking about shuttle buses from Stratford International car park. But then at the planning meeting for that, people were saying, there was actually a disabled member on the committee saying, Stratford International car park is not accessible. And so at sort of every single level, it doesn't take a lot of it's quite easy to see that it's not suitable.
So interesting, just in terms of representation, right? Because would that have potentially come up in that planning meeting, unless someone who actually has to experience?
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, there has been an incredible campaign from the Stop the MSG Sphere campaign, who has brought in people from all sorts of backgrounds in, raised the awareness about the issue, got people on side, and we wouldn't be here without that campaign today. And without that campaign, those sorts of people might not have been in the room. People, I've been really inspired watching them attend meeting after meeting after meeting, raising the same points that the mayor's made in his report about the sphere being unsuitable. And it's been frustrating. It's felt like there's been this desire to push it through at any cost, and it's fallen, and actually the cost is going to be, we'll find out, but presumably quite large, and I think those people have quite a lot to answer for.
But on the other side of it, there's an argument that bringing in something like the Sphere would attract a lot of people to the area. It would bring in quite a lot of money. The advertising revenue would be, we'd be able to feasibly count how much that would be. It would be an amount that's way out of my ability to understand. I mean, the opposite argument to that is, should you not have let it go ahead so that you could provide the area with extra cash?
Okay, so let's just think about where it's being built. It's the Olympic Park. That is an area that has had more new developments than probably anywhere else in the country in the last decade and a half. We've got, Sadler's Wells, the BBC, we've got universities, we've got Westfield, we've got the aquatic centre, we've got the velodrome, we've got all of these different attractions, we've got the park itself, we've got Hackney Marshes, we've got all of these different attractions to the area already. And what I've been trying to say to people is, if you're only, as a politician, as a leader of an area, if your only offer to people to bring in investment, to bring in money, is to say, well, you have to put up with this massive advertising billboard the size of Big Ben and the London Eye, then to be honest, I think that you need to do better. There are so many different ways to bring investment in, as the Olympics themselves have shown, right? Than this sphere. And I think the thing for me is, I have been at no point convinced that they actually intend to build a vibrant addition to London's cultural scene, because if they were, they would not have taken on the amount of opposition that the screens on the outside have led to. I'm confident if it weren't for that, despite the other problems that we've mentioned, that this sphere probably would have gone ahead. But it's the screens on the outside, the advertising revenue, that has caused all of these problems for them, and I believe that has ultimately led to it being rejected. So if all you care about is building an addition to London's cultural scene, a vibrant new entertainment space, then you don't need the screens on the outside. And that's sort of been the nail in the coffin for this.
So that's the argument. So that there would there have been a proposal which was, it's dark on the outside, it's a normal building, it's not projecting the light of the sun in bedrooms. Then would you have gone ahead with it, or be more? Would you have had any consideration to it?
I think any application would be looked at on the face of what actually comes forward. Like I said, there are other concerns, Stratford Station, but that isn't, that's not an insurmountable problem. That's not a inherent problem with the proposal. The screens and the light pollution you can't. Even the mitigations for that are harmful in and of themselves. So the blackout blinds, I've been sort of saying that if you get to a point where you have to offer blackout blinds to make your proposal more acceptable, then isn't that a sign that the proposal isn't acceptable in the first place? But on the face of it, does London need more entertainment venues? Absolutely. There's an argument that actually at that size, it's sort of the same capacity as the O2. Maybe there's a bigger gap in the market at a different sort of capacity. That's what I've been hearing from lots of people. But I'm not, I come from a theatre background. I'm not against more entertainment venues, particularly in Stratford. But now the sphere has been rejected, thanks to the hard work of the Stop the MSG Sphere campaign, Zach Polanski on the Assembly, Sean Berry, who was a Green candidate for mayor last time and who campaigned against that as part of that campaign, Zoe Garbett, who's our candidate next year, and us as councillors and residents coming together. We've got the sphere rejected. They've announced yesterday that they're selling the land, and what we're saying now is actually some sort of justice for the area, for the 5 years of heartache this has caused, would be more social housing on the site. And so I've called for the Mayor of Newham, Roxana Fiaz, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, to come together and try and find a way that land could be either bought up by the council or the GLA if the numbers work out, or some social housing provider to actually build something that contributes to solving Newham's problems rather than making them worse. I don't know if you've seen, but Newham has a massive temporary accommodation crisis, costing tens of millions of pounds a year right now. That's money that would have been going to, schools, or to making our streets cleaner, or to supporting residents, but is having to go to hotels for nightly hotel bills. And I think that's such a huge waste of money, but there just isn't the spaces, and we have to house these people. Rightly, we have to house them. And so we need more housing in Newham, and I think some social housing on the site could really contribute to solving that problem.
So what is holding up social housing being built? Funding, or is it planning restrictions? What is it that's being...
Well, I think it's partly ideological, right? The government a while ago decided that councils shouldn't be housing people anymore. We've had this sort of really short-sighted right to buy policy, which the Green Party rightly opposes, which is depriving councils of their housing, and then I believe being prevented from building to replenish that housing. So right to buy is a big problem, and we want to see that reformed or scrapped. There is clearly a bigger problem with the planning system that we could talk about all day about how, and we might have different ideas about how we can fix it. But I think clearly there is a problem there. But fundamentally, councils do not have the resources that they need to solve the problems that they're facing. We've seen, I think, 50% budget cuts since 2010 in local authorities, if not more in some places. There's an ideological view that councils should be doing less and should be having less resources from the government. And I'm not convinced from what we've seen from Keir Starmer that he plans to fix that, or from Rachel Reeves, despite the fact that it's Labour councillors up and down the country primarily who are having to make really tough decisions that are causing really harmful impacts on their residents. And you're going to see more and more councils go bust because of the funding situation.
And also the rise of rogue landlordism. I was just a couple of weeks ago talking to their council about what, they're dealing with sometimes 30 tenants in a 6-bedroom house being charged an extortionate amount to live there. These people can profit because there isn't social housing available.
Absolutely. And I think just on this, back to the sphere for a second, one of the sort of contributing problems to that is people say, why don't you just move? Well, some people have mortgages, and there was a severe risk of negative equity there, which is when the sort of value of the property is no longer able to match the mortgage and you can't sell. Or if you're a renter entering London's renting market right now, nobody would do that by choice. Nobody would leave their home right now if they've got one. So that it's not so easy as just saying move somewhere else, as you just identified. Newham does have a landlord licensing scheme, but it's clearly not doing a good enough job. And councils should be given the money to buy up these properties that landlords are leaving. So because of reforms, landlords are leaving the sector. Councils should be having, the first right of refusal for these properties. And the government should be giving them the money to say, okay, there's somebody already living in here. If that person is evicted, that's going to become the council's problem. let's keep them in the property, give the council the right to buy the property. And I think that would help prevent this problem getting so much worse.
Because councils are also struggling with vacancies, right? So landlords, when they leave the sector, they don't necessarily sell the property straight away. They might go, it's too much hassle to rent it out, but it's still increasing in value, so I can keep it under my belt. I mean, what do you think about some proposals or some ideas that have been talked about, making vacant properties illegal?
Yeah, so there's lots of ways that you can solve this problem. It's interesting that we've got the winter statement today, or the autumn statement, today from the Chancellor.
It should be the winter as well. This is kind of like, with like fashion season and you're doing spring, summer now. And it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we've got the autumn statement from the Chancellor where, if we had a Green Party Chancellor, we'd be talking about how we can tax wealth so much more. Caroline Lucas was saying on TV the other day that there's something like an average of 4% we've taxed wealth and an average of 30-something% that we've taxed income. There's clearly a disparity. And if we had proper land value taxes, then if you're not making the most of that land, then if you've got to pay the land value tax, then you're going to have to find a way to make use of that land, and it's going to really penalise those people who are keeping properties empty and those people who are speculating on properties as well, because that's a wider problem of foreign owners buying properties just to sell them. Maybe less of a problem in this economy, but certainly recently it's been a big problem. So that's a solution. Banning foreign ownership of or purchasing of these new builds is another solution.
I'm really big into this about new builds. Put up a whole new block of flats. I mean, even buy-to-let landlords, they'll clean up. They'll buy quite a few of them and then rent them out. Yeah,
and sometimes you see, or you certainly hear about these new builds that aren't even marketed in the UK. They're just marketed abroad because they're not really trying to contribute to solving problems in the UK. But I firmly believe in more of a role for the state in house building. And I don't think that we can rely on, private developers and just hope that they're going to build the stuff that we need. I think the best place people to do that is probably local authorities, but they just don't have the money.
Because you're essentially asking a developer then to be a charity, because if you are a developer, you're business minded, you're not going to be going after the affordable housing to build that, are you? You're going to be going after the luxury apartments.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason why these planning applications take so long is they come in with a lowballed number on how many social housing units they're going to provide, or affordable housing units. The officers at the council know that the councillors aren't going to approve that, so they argue for more, and then you try and get that as high as you possibly can, and then as soon as it's approved, you find out that, well, actually they're now claiming that that's not economical anymore. The whole situation is a complete disaster and not a good way of doing things. I'm not a planning expert, but I firmly believe that there has to be a better way of doing it, and that we need really a sort of council housing revolution.
You need government intervention as well.
Yeah, and you need councils and the GLA, the sort of Mayor of London, to be given the resources to make the decisions that, we elect people who want to do these things in London. We elect a Labour Mayor of London. We generally elect Labour councillors, although more and more of those are becoming Green councillors, who generally want to make these investments in their community, building the housing that the communities need, and that there used to be this pride of the people that their council house, and I find it so frustrating that we've moved so far away from that, and I think that we need some more bravery from our national politicians to say actually things can be different, rather than sort of just tinkering around the edges.
You talked about, just before we started this, we were talking about social housing and how that is now built in certain areas. And you were I forget the phrase that you just said. So what it was?
Pepper potting.
Yeah. Potting.
So this is the idea that instead of having like the social housing block and the sort of commercial block, that you put the flats within the same building. I think that's, I'm again not an expert, but I think that's the idea. And so you don't sort of have the luxury building and then the slightly or much less usually nice building next to it of social housing tenants, and it can create this sort of tenure blind situation where actually doesn't matter what kind of tenure you have. You're a member of this community, and you're just as valuable and just as important to be listened to. And there's quite a lot of the buildings in the Olympic Park that's going on. I think that's certainly better rather than having sort of the rich block and the poor block, which is a really awful way of putting it. But
do you see, it was terrible for a couple of blocks in Nine Elms, which is South London, just past Vauxhall, if you're not
I'm familiar.
But in those blocks, so what they did was they put the social housing, again, this pepper potting that you're talking about, they attached it to the luxury apartment. But they gave a separate entrance.
Yeah, poor doors.
And so you're really creating you're creating a class system.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And this is why, in theory, it's against Newham has a housing developer. I'm a councillor in Newham, I should say. Has a housing development company called Populo, and in theory they're against this thing, but I think they're building development in the docks where they've got a poor door, and I think it's really, really appalling actually. And not enough attention is paid to this, that even when councils or council-owned developers are building these properties, that even they're doing it. And I think actually councils exist to serve everyone, not just commercial interests. And
it even goes to show as well that the type of people who the developers that are building this, you get told the social housing has to be a certain spec and it has to be a certain standard or whatever. They will follow it to a T, but almost to the point where it's taking the piss. If a flat has to be, say, 6 foot by 4 foot in one area, that one part of the flat, they will build it exactly to that spec. They do not give you another inch.
No, they don't. And this is why people who sort of say, let's strip away the planning policy and just let them build. Well, what they'll build is really quite appalling if you do that. They're like you said yourself, they're not charities. They will just build whatever makes them the most money. And actually, when we in a city like London, we don't have that much undeveloped space to use, and we should be putting that to the best and most societal good as possible. And that's why I'm sort of saying on this MSG sphere space that we should have some social housing put there. But wherever we have this land, it's really, really important that we really scrutinise what's coming forward and say, is this the best use? Is this what solves the problems in our area the most? Is this really providing for the people that we represent? And quite often that's just not the case, unfortunately.
Just a last little bit. I wonder, do you think that this planning application would have been considered if, say, the sphere was going to be built in the home counties? And if you don't think it would have got through, why do you think it nearly got through in Stratford?
This is actually a really interesting part of the story, is why is it this location? Because this location is really quite unsuitable, but why is it this location that's been put on? And for most people will not know, but because of the Olympics, there isn't a normal planning process in the Olympic Park. It's about the most streamlined as possible planning process in the country. It skips straight past the councils, goes to a committee of mostly people appointed by the Mayor of London and a small number of councillors from the area. And if it couldn't even be approved in that streamlined process, then it really wouldn't be approved anywhere. And that's people who sort of reacted to the news and sort of just did you can't build anything anywhere these days. Well, if it could be built anywhere, it would have been built here. But it was really, really clear, even here, that it's not suitable because it really doesn't benefit people. But there's a wider point of why is it East London that's got, has to put up with an airport, has to put up with the Silvertown Tunnel, and was going to have to put up with this sphere? Why does it always seem to be East London that things get dumped on? And that's a wider question about the voices of marginalised people. And I'm probably not the best person in the world to be their voice, but I do think it's important that somebody says, actually, no, enough is enough, and that's what the people said with this sphere. And I kind of have to keep pinching myself, because you never win these battles, and yet this campaign did, and I'm so proud of all of these people. I'm just, the person sat at the microphone right now, but there's really so many people that made this happen. And I think, all of the politicians, the mayor of Newham is saying, I led this campaign, and it's just not true. The residents led this campaign, and they deserve a lot of credit. And sort of 10 years from now, residents in Stratford aren't going to have to put up with a advertising billboard the size of Big Ben and the London Eye. And that's, you never win these battles, but we won this one.
I'm just going to do you a service there, because there will be people listening in other parts of the country that will go, oh, they have to put up with an airport. They have to put up with, all of these on the face of it, fantastic facilities. But we're not talking about an area where you can travel to the local airport or whatever. We're talking about an airport where the planes fly pretty close to people's houses.
Yeah, an airport that's overwhelmingly used by business, and the 1%, not really used by the people in Newham who have to put up with it.
And they're low. They're flying low.
Yeah, and they're trying to expand right now as well. The council amazingly rejected it, and throughout that whole process, they really went on about how hard they work with the community, and the community really appreciates the airport. As soon as the community's representatives rejected them, they didn't waste a second to go, well, actually, we're just going to shut you out of the process and go to national government instead.
This is London City Airport.
This is London City Airport, yeah. And you've seen some really good stuff from people like Zach Polanski talking about private jets and...
Oh, yeah, it's not like a budget holiday.
No, absolutely
airport.
not, no.
Go there and go off to, Tenerife on your package holiday. That's not what it is.
No, for people who aren't aware, it's not an airport I've ever used, although I don't really make that much of a habit of flying anyway. I'm a bit scared of it.
Yeah, I'm a violent claustrophobic.
Really?
When they shut the door on the plane, if I'm ever on one, I'm like, right, that's it. I'm done.
Just sleep through it.
No, I sit there hyperventilating for the amount of time of the flight.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And then I'm not relaxed, not even when we're on the ground, only when the door's open.
Only when the door's open you can get off. So this airport isn't at all for the people of Newham. It's just a place that's been dumped for the city to use primarily, and that's why it's Newham Green Party policy to close the airport. There was a really great proposal from Sean Berry to talking about housing. That's an amazing patch of land that's currently just being used for a runway. If you close the airport, you can build a brand new mixed-use community, similar sort of idea as East Village, but hopefully a lot more equal than that's been. East Village is the athletes' village from the Olympics, and that's a really great proposal as well. And it's things like that I'm not somebody who makes a habit of objecting to things. I'm in politics because I want to bring things forward, and it's frustrating that we've got greedy people who just aren't interested in residents or doing the best for the community. They're just sort of figuring out how they can make the most money. And City Airport is really the most egregious example. Claiming that they want to listen to residents, and as soon as residents say no, it's like, well, we don't care what you say anymore. And that's for an expansion that would end the small respite that they have from flights. So there's a weekend respite from flights, and they want to end that. And it's really quite egregious. And the committee voted unanimously to oppose it. And yet they just want to overrule us.
Well, you've gone out to the sphere and you were successful. So now just already say goodbye to London City Airport. That's the end of that.
Well, I think that's a maybe slightly negative take. I
meant it.
Yeah.
Complimentary way that you're clearly a good campaigner.
Thank you. Well, it's an amazing campaign of amazing people. The Stop the MSG Sphere campaign is really fantastic, and what I'm trying to focus on and really get attention to is what we can do positively with this space. It's not about opposing things. It's about making sure that space is used in the best way. So we want some social housing on this site, and on City Airport we want a new community, I think, there.